Hello and a very good afternoon. My name is Abhilash and I am from the AD Solutions team here at Manage Engine, and I would be your presenter for today. Now, before we get started with today's webinar, I'd like to thank you all for joining in. Thank you so much for taking out the time in your busy schedule, and thank you for being a part of today's webinar. Now, I would like to wish you all a very happy and a prosperous new year before we jump into this webinar. And before I get started, I would like to run a quick audio and a video check because I want to make sure that everybody out here today is able to hear me and is able to see the video, the screen well and clear. So I'll just start off with a quick audio check. If you can hear me, if my voice is well and clear without any distortion or any problem with the audio, just punch in yes via the chat box that you see in front of you. Just say yes, just say okay via the chat box in front of you so I can confirm that you can hear me well and clear. I'm just waiting on a few confirmations before I can get started with today's webinar. If you can hear me well and clear, please punch in yes, just say okay, just say great via the chat box. That's great. Thank you so much, Rakesh. If you can see the screen, if you can see the title, my name and my email ID, just punch in yes via the chat box. You could raise your hand, you could say yes, you could okay, you could say okay if you can see the title, my name and my email ID. That's perfect. Thank you so much. All right, without further delay, let's go ahead and jump into today's webinar. So today's webinar's topic is security hardening begins with a clean Active Directory. Right now, before I actually jump into today's agenda, I would like to tell you that the entire session is being recorded and the video would be sent to you via email just within a few days after the webinar is done. All right, so yes, security hardening begins with a clean Active Directory. Why did I choose to speak about this topic? The reason I chose to speak about this topic today is because maintaining a clean and a well-organized Active Directory is often a preliminary step for security hardening. Right? It can help you gain better visibility. It can help you perform your management tasks better. It can help you run your daily administrative tasks better. And if yours is a growing organization, then you would need to manage your Active Directory efficiently, and maintaining a clean and a well-structured Active Directory can come a long way in protecting your organization from security breaches as well. Right? But the problem is none of us actually regard Active Directory cleanup to be a high priority task. Right? Cleaning up Active Directory, cleaning up the unused user accounts, making sure that all the permissions are okay, making sure that the group memberships are okay. We do not regard cleaning up Active Directory as a high priority task. We generally do not care until someone complains or until something breaks. Right? And speaking about today's environment, it's just not Active Directory anymore. We have a plethora of cloud-hosted applications within our environment. So that makes the process of cleaning up or maintaining a well-organized infrastructure all the more important. Now let me illustrate this using an example, right? Let's say you haven't cleaned your Active Directory from the last year or from the last 2 years, right? So you've got a number of user accounts with permissions that you may not know about. You've got multiple groups. God knows what access those groups have, right? You've got users whose passwords haven't been changed in a long time. Now, all of this can cause problems. All of this can act as an invitation for cyber attackers. So let's jump into today's agenda, right? So I'm just going to start off with what a messy Active Directory is all about. Right now, I keep saying that cleaning up Active Directory is important. It's important to have a well-organized infrastructure. And let's go ahead and actually see what a messy Active Directory is. Right? How do we know if our infrastructure is actually cluttered, is actually filled with obsolete data? In the second part of today's webinar, let's actually see what a messy environment or a messy infrastructure can do to you. Right? How does a messy environment actually affect you as an administrator or a help desk technician? And then we will see the native solutions. We will try and clean up Active Directory using the native solutions offered by Microsoft. And finally, in order to perform a thorough cleanup of Active Directory and to prevent any problems down the road, we will employ a structured approach where first we will spot the anomalies, right? We will find where problems are and we will perform a thorough cleanup. After which we will set time-bound permissions, right? And then we will try and automate cleanup processes so you do not actually need to be involved in cleaning up Active Directory at all. So what is a messy Active Directory? You've got unwanted group access. Let me illustrate this using an example, right? You've got groups nested inside groups. For instance, you have a domain administrators group, right? And you have a marketing intern group. And you have, let's say, a help desk group. And you've got groups nested into groups and you do not know which of your users have privileged access. And when I say unwanted group access, I just don't mean groups with an Active Directory, but groups across infrastructures as well. For instance, groups inside Exchange or Office 365. Your cross-domain groups, if you have multiple DCs in your environment, right? And your groups that have access to files or folders hosting sensitive data. The moment you feel that you've lost track of the number of groups and the number of users who have permission to groups in your environment, there is a problem. You have a lot of stale or inactive resources, right? For example, you've got a number of users that are not being used, right? You probably have created a lot of users during mass onboarding, but you've never actually used those user accounts. You've got user accounts who were active at one point in time, but they aren't active anymore. And just to add to the pain, these accounts also have administrator privileges. Right? So stale accounts and user accounts that have never been used is also a sign of a messy environment. You have unnecessary permissions, right? And by permissions here, I just don't mean permissions on your Active Directory objects, but also on your files and folders. You have delegated permissions to your help desk technicians over the years, but at this point, you do not know the permissions that your help desk technicians have. You have a lot of files and folders in your organization, right? And your help desk technicians may have delegated permissions to your end users to specific files and folders, but you do not have a bird's eye view of which folder and which user and what access that particular user has to that folder. You have lots and lots of empty objects, right? You've got empty groups, you've got empty organization unit, you've got servers that are not being used, and the same logic comes in again where you've got stale user accounts or user accounts that are not being used. You've got inconsistent or missing attribute values. For example, the member of attribute value, right? The attribute value that specifies group membership within your Active Directory is not filled for all of your users. All of your users do not have an employee ID assigned to them. A few of your users do not have a manager assigned to them. A few of your users created by, let's say, novice help desk technicians do not have logon hours set. Right? These are inconsistencies in attribute values, or simply the attribute values are missing. And finally, you've got your hybrid environment as well, because I keep saying that is just not Active Directory anymore. You've got a plethora of custom applications inside your infrastructure, and you've got to monitor permissions across applications. Let's say Office 365 or Exchange or G Suite. Right? So these are a few indicators using which you can say that your Active Directory environment is actually messed up, right? Is actually cluttered with obsolete data, with invalid permissions, with invalid group grants or memberships. So how does this affect you, right? As an organization, as an administrator, or a help desk technician, how does a messy environment actually affect you? Number one, your management and your routine tasks, right? The tasks that you perform every day, your day-to-day management tasks, user onboarding, user offboarding, changing group memberships, adding users to distribution lists, changing passwords, giving users permissions to certain OUs, or giving users permissions to certain files and folders. Your routine and your management tasks become difficult to perform because you do not have enough visibility. You do not know what is happening where. And one change made at one end can trigger furthermore changes. I would like to call this the ripple effect, right? If you do not know how your Active Directory is structured, if you do not know how your Active Directory is organized, a small change that you make at one end, right, could affect multiple other users and you wouldn't have a clue about it. A good example for this can be your group memberships. Right now, let's say I add a user to an administrator group, right? And now the user added to the administrators group, right, has administrative privilege that we know of, right? But little do we know that that user belongs to other groups that we do not know as well. And the second point is security. Now, when you have a messy environment, when you have a cluttered infrastructure, you have less visibility. For example, who has access to what, how they got it, and what they're doing with it. And by security here, I mean permissions over your Active Directory objects and over your files and folders. Another point is compliance, right? It becomes really difficult to adhere to compliance standards, right? Because when you do not know what's happening within your infrastructure, it's nearly impossible to stand tall when your compliance auditor comes in to check, right? Because if an auditor finds out that you have a lot of invalid permissions, right, that in itself could be a problem. Your ntds.dit, not just your permissions, not just your security, not just your management tasks, and not just your compliances, but your Active Directory database growth is also pretty much affected, right? And identity management as a whole, especially in hybrid environments, becomes really complex. 90% of Active Directory related breaches are due to mismanaged permissions or due to mismanaged activities, according to a recent survey conducted by Skyport. And how does mismanagement happen? When you do not have control over your infrastructure, when you have a cluttered infrastructure. So how do we go about solving this? How do we go about fixing our messy environment? How do we restructure or redesign our Active Directory environment for better use, right? To prevent problems that may come now or down the road. Let's take a look at their native solutions. We've got two solutions that Microsoft offers us to perform cleanup. Number one is the ADUC tool, right? Now, if I quickly head into my domain right here and open up this is the tool that we all know of, right? Because this is the tool that we use to perform our daily administrative tasks, right? But the problem with this tool is it is very monotonous, right? There are multiple steps involved and there is a lot of repetition involved in steps. For instance, if I have to find out which groups my users are members of, how do I do that? I select a user, right click, properties, head all the way into member of, and this is how I find out that Pete is a member of Just Domain Users, and I will have to repeat this for every user in my environment. What if I want to find out the logon hours of all of my users? Then I will have to head into the attribute editor tab and go ahead and search for the logon hours attribute that comes right here. Here we go, right? Similarly, for any attribute that you can think of, it is a very repetitive process. It is a very cumbersome process because you need to manually open up every user and check that user's permissions or privileges or any attribute value that is being set. This can get really repetitive. This can get really annoying, right? This will prevent you from having a bird's eye view onto your infrastructure. Now, this is when Microsoft came up with a tool called PowerShell. The problem with PowerShell is that PowerShell is now being increasingly used as a cyber attack tool. Right? You need to know a fair amount of scripting in order to use PowerShell. And honestly, the scripts that you get from Google or the scripts that you get from the internet can make unwanted changes. Trust me, I have been through this. Right? When you take a script from the internet and when you run the script, you do not know if the script is actually doing what it's supposed to do. If the script is actually triggering changes that it is not supposed to trigger. Right? Now let's say you want to find out some information from Active Directory. Let's say you want to find out the number of inactive users using PowerShell. Right? Now let me tell you that this command right here can give you the number of inactive users from the last 90 days, but then the count right here is 301. Right? Now let me tell you that this answer right here is invalid. The reason is because we have forgotten to enter a quote somewhere within the syntax that is present above. And a simple mistake, right? A simple syntax error such as failing to give in quotes can generate invalid data, and that can lead to further problems or further chaos. So cleaning up Active Directory using the native tools is not a really feasible solution because you just have two options. A, use the ADUC tool, or B, use PowerShell. ADUC tool is too manual, is too cumbersome, is too repetitive, right? There is no easy way to get a bird's eye view of information using the ADUC tool. And PowerShell involves scripting. Let's say you have a script that claims to do something, right? But the script is actually malicious. What would you do then? Let's say you have a script to change the users, all of your users group memberships within Active Directory, but the script does changes that you are not aware of. I'm so sorry. What happens then? Right? So both of these solutions are not really valid because they may trigger unwanted changes, or they are too monotonous or too repetitive. So how do we go about solving messy Active Directory problems? How do we declutter or degunk our Active Directory? Here are a few ways you can do it, right? So the step one, the first thing that I would like for you to do is gain insights into your infrastructure and perform cleanup. The first thing that you need to do before performing any kind of cleanup on your Active Directory environment is to find out where what went wrong, right? So you can better target your cleanup tasks and you can run the cleanup tasks to fix those problems or fix those vulnerabilities. But how do you do that using Active Directory? Again, I would repeat the same thing where you have to use PowerShell. Right? Let's say I want to clean up all the stale users in my environment. Let's say I want to disable all my stale users and I want to move them to another organizational unit. One way of doing that is by using the ADUC tool where I check the user's last logon time, or I use PowerShell, which again can bring in unwanted changes or can produce false data because of a small syntax error that we've done. So how do we gain insights into Active Directory, right? So this is how it can be done. That's right. We've got groups, we've got files and folders, we've got custom apps, we've got group policies, we've got servers, we've got users, right? We need to gain insights on all of these objects. But where do we start? Because Active Directory is huge, right? Let's say I need to find permissions on my files and folders. How would I do that? So this is how we would do it using AD Manager Plus. So if I quickly head into AD Manager Plus, this is my AD Manager Plus console and I am accessing it on my local host via the URL. All I have to do now is head into reports. Now these are ready-made reports for all of your Active Directory objects. right? Your users, your groups, your OUs, your GPOs, your NTFS permissions, and your Active Directory object permissions as well. So let's go ahead and start with user identities, right? So because users, like I always say, are the weakest link in your organization, let's go ahead and start off with our user identities. Number one, user group membership. This is how we do it in Active Directory. Right? If I put in net user, let's say a username called Luna, this is what we get. These are Luna's group memberships. And you can see that Luna is not an administrator or a privileged user of any kind. Luna is just a member of regular Active Directory groups. Now let me show you something. If I head into user reports and head into users in groups, right? And let me go ahead and select the group called Exchange Windows Permissions. Here we go. And once I click OK, and once I click Generate, check this out. These are the members of Exchange Windows Permissions, and Luna is actually a member of Exchange Windows Permissions, right? So how did this exactly happen? Because Active Directory told me that Luna is just a member of these groups. But AD Manager Plus says that Luna is a member of Exchange Windows Permissions. This happened via nested memberships, right? Where the marketing interns group, it was in turn a member of the helpdesk group, which was in turn a member of Exchange Windows Permissions with an Active Directory. But why am I showing Exchange Windows Permissions? Why is this group important? Exchange Windows Permissions has write DACL permissions on the domain object. That's right, any user who is a member of Exchange Windows Permissions can make changes to the domain node, the node that you see right here. If I right click on this, head into properties and security, any user who is a member of the Exchange Windows Permissions can modify these permissions. And that's why it's important to check the memberships of Exchange Windows Permissions. Similarly, you could just hit the plus sign here, select any other group that you want, and once you hit generate, you have the information right in front of you. Right? And not just information generation. Once you have the information in front of you, you can simply select the information and you can perform the cleanup tasks then and there. For instance, you would want to delete the user from the group, from Active Directory. You would want to disable the user, or you would want to simply remove the invalid user from the group. And you can also take all of these results and you could export them in any form that you want. All right. So that is one way you can check group memberships by using users in groups and the groups for users report as well. Check this out. I have a user called Tony, right? And Tony, let me run this again. Net user Tony, right? This is what Active Directory tells me. Tony is just a member of helpdesk and domain users. But what do we have here? Tony is a member of helpdesk. Helpdesk is a member of Marketing Australia. Australia is a member of AD Group, and AD Group is in turn a member of domain administrators. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how users get elevated privileges, and we would not have a clue about it. Right? And like always, you can take the actions from the place where you generated the report, and you could export it in any form that you want as well. So these two reports can help you find group memberships for your users. All right, and we also have specific group reports where you can find detailed group members. For instance, if I head into detailed group members, you can find out memberships based on certain parameters. For instance, you would want to exclude your disabled users. You would want to exclude your managed groups, right? Or you would want to just see specific attributes. Here we go. These are customized reports just for you. Under user reports, we've got users and groups for users, and these are reports pertaining to the group objects alone. For instance, you can find out the recently created groups, the recently modified groups. So number one is check your user group memberships, both of which can be done with AD Manager Plus. And it's important to check the nested memberships, the privileged group memberships, and your cross-platform memberships, for instance, Exchange Windows Permissions, and your cross-domain memberships as well. Number two, your stale and your unused accounts. How do we do that? If I quickly head into AD Manager and head into user reports, we have something called inactive users right here. So all you have to do is simply specify the time that you want, or you could specify a couple of days as well. And once you generate, you have the information right in front of you. And again, the cleanup can be done then and there, and you can also specify certain parameters. And if you wish to modify the end result of the report, all you have to do is click on add or remove columns and specify the attributes that you wish to see and you wish to remove. So using this, you can find out all of your stale users. And how do you find your user accounts that have never been used, right? Your unused user accounts. Now that can be done by the users never logged on report right here. So AD Manager Plus has a single console and every report works the same way, right? You can go ahead and simply click on the report. You can get the information that you have in front of you. You can modify the results that you wish to see in the report by adding or removing attributes. You can specify certain actions that you wish to, and you can also export the report in any format that you want as well. So that would be my second point: clean up your stale and your unused accounts. My third point would be cleaning based on account status, right? For instance, you wish to find out which of your accounts have never expire set, right? These accounts will never expire in Active Directory. You can do that with the report right here. You can find out all of your disabled users, and you can, let's say, move them to another OU. You can find out all of your enabled users right here, and you can ensure that only the users that you trust are actually enabled. You can find out all of your account expired or your locked out users, and similarly, you can carry out the cleanup activity. Tip number 4, inconsistent user attributes, right? User attributes that are missing or that have invalid or outdated values. Now this can also be done with AD Manager. For instance, if I click on users with empty attributes, all you have to do is simply select the attributes that you want right here and click OK. And you can also specify certain conditions. For instance, match all of the selected attributes or match any of the selected attributes. And once you click generate, you will find all users that do not have a group membership, an employee ID, or an email address. Right? These are crucial attributes that every user must have, and just in case you miss them out, you can find them using the users with empty attributes report. We also have a report for users with duplicate attributes. For instance, users that have the same employee number, or users that have the same email ID or the same logon name for that matter. You can also drill down deeper and find out users who have managers, users who are stray, who do not have managers, users who have a logon script, who do not have a logon script, and also your hybrid environment as well. For instance, your link or Skype enabled or your disabled users. And finally, password-based cleanup. Right now, we've cleaned up our groups, we've cleaned up our inactive and our unused accounts. We've cleaned up based on our account status. For instance, account never expires or account locked out, or simply enabled and disabled users. And we've also cleaned up our user attributes, inconsistent or missing attributes. But password cleanup is also equally important, because passwords are the first line of defense for your organizations. Passwords are the baselines for security, right? So in order to do that, we have something called password reports here as well. For instance, you wish to find out the users who haven't changed their passwords in a long time, and you want to force a change password at next logon, or you wish to reset that particular user's password. Similarly, you can find out users who have password never expires set, because over the time there are service accounts and there are users created who may have password never expires, right? So using the report right here, you can find out all of your users who have password never expires set. And similarly, there are other password reports here that you could use as well. So these are a few ways you can ensure that your user identities are clean, right? They have the values that they should, right? They are only the member of groups that they are. They are disabled only when they have to be. They are enabled only when they have to be. The attribute values assigned to these users are not invalid, right? And the passwords used are strong as well. Now, like I keep saying, it's just not Active Directory anymore. We have now gotten our hybrid identities as well. So we need an insight on a hybrid environment like Exchange or Office 365 or G Suite. How do we go about doing that? If I quickly head into AD Manager Plus again, we have got something called Exchange reports right here. Now, using this report, you can find out details within your Exchange environment. For instance, all of your users who do not have a mailbox, and again, you can take the actions then and there. Right? There are multiple other reports. For instance, you want to find out users who are members of certain distribution lists. Right? You can find out users who aren't members of distribution lists. And not just Exchange, we've got G Suite here as well, where you can find the active and the suspended users. And we've got a specific tab for Office 365 if you've got Office 365 deployed in your organization. For instance, you can find out stale users in Office 365. You can find out users who are created but never actually used Office 365. You can find out users who have multi-factor authentication disabled. You can find out the soon to expire password users. And not just this, you can also manage your Office 365 licenses. Right? Now, licenses are something that many of us suffer from because licenses are often allocated to users that either are not there at the company or are not making use of the license, and we tend to buy more and more, spending more for licenses. But using the license report, you can gain an insight on all Office 365 licenses deployed and how many are allocated and how many are not. All right, so this is hybrid identity cleanup. Now, what we did right now is we saw how to clean up our user accounts, right? The user group membership and everything, and also users inside hybrid Active Directory. For instance, Exchange, G Suite, or Office 365. What next? Cleaning up our files and folders and our security objects is also equally important. Right? Now, this includes permissions on Active Directory objects. These can be permissions assigned manually or assigned via delegation, and permissions on your NTFS files and folders and the shares as well. So how do we go about doing this? If I head into Active Directory, the only way we can find out permissions for a particular object is to go to the object, right click, head into properties, head into security, right here, and manually check the permissions of all users on that particular object. Now imagine doing this in a large scale environment, right? Imagine checking permissions for all of your users manually. This can bring in a lot of problems. This task is just not difficult, but also very repetitive and very cumbersome. And the same logic applies to your files and folders as well. For instance, here is my folder. I wish to check the permissions on it. I head into properties and select the security tab again, and this there has to be done for all of my folders across all of my file servers in my organization. This is impossible to get a bird's eye view of permissions on AD objects and files and folders using the native tools provided by Active Directory. So how do we go about fixing this? Again, if I head into AD Manager and reports, like we have users and password reports, we also have something called NTFS reports right here. Now all I have to do is simply just blow up a report and specify the changes that I want. Like you can see right here, if I head into reports, NTFS reports, and let me quickly log in. And let's say folders accessible by accounts, right? I have an account here, or I could select multiple accounts if I wish to as well. And I have a server specified right here, and I can check for folder permissions up to the folder level that I specify, or all the subfolder levels as well. All right, and the access type right here will be any control or any permission that I wish to specify right here, and the information is right in front of us. And you can now see that Luna has permissions over the company confidential folder and the subfolder 1, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3 as well. And you can view the detailed permissions like this. All right, so this is one tab using which you can find out all permissions over on your files and folders in your organization. For instance, folders accessible by accounts or permissions on certain specific folders, where all I have to do is simply select a server that I want or select a specific folder within the server. And once I click OK, we will have the permissions right in front of us. And we can also refine the result further by specifying certain parameters right here. And like always, we can view the permissions and we can export it in the way we want, and we can add or remove attributes to view the result that we wish to actually see. Alright, so that's NTFS reports for permissions for your files and folders all across your organization. So how do we go about fixing these permissions? Right, now we know that our users may have invalid permissions. How do we go about fixing them? If I head into the management tab right here, we have something called file server management. Alright, now I can add all my file servers within my organization right here, and all I have to do now is simply select the option that I want. For instance, modify NTFS permissions. Right, and right over here I can specify the folder that I want, the permission that I want, and the level that I wish to check. And we also have specific checkboxes. For instance, include inheritable options from this parents object, or remove all permissions on that particular folder and give permissions that I specify right here as well. Alright, if you have a folder with secure permissions or with least privileged access already implemented, you can simply copy permissions from that folder and you can let it apply to this folder. Alright, now we know how to check permissions on our files and folders and how to fix them using the management tab with an AD Manager Plus, where folders across your file servers, permissions can be managed using just this one window, and you can restructure permissions using the unique checkboxes that we have right here. For example, again, remove all existing permissions and apply only the above permissions, or copy from a particular folder. When it comes to Active Directory objects, we have something called security reports right here. Now you can find out specific permissions that you want right here. For instance, all of your AD objects that are accessible by certain accounts. Let's go ahead and search for an account called Luna. Right? And these are the permissions that Luna has over all and every Active Directory object. It can be a group, it can be an OU, it can be a computer, you name it. And if you wish to search for specific permissions, that is possible using security reports as well, where you can simply choose an object from Active Directory, let's say an OU right here, and you can select the permission that you wish, and you can specify the permission that you wish to check. For instance, you want to see which of your users have full control over that OU, and once you click generate, the information will be right in front of you. And like always, you can export the set of permissions and you can work your way backwards again. So that would be the second part. The first part was user cleanup, the second part was hybrid identity cleanup, and the third part was your NTFS and security permission insight and cleanup. Now what happens to our other objects? Because cleanup has to be done everywhere, right? It's not just on your users or on your files and folders and your security objects, but across every object. AD Manager Plus can help you with that as well, where you can clean up all your groups and OUs. For instance, you can find your empty OUs, your unmanaged groups, your unmanaged OUs, your groups that has specific members, your groups that are not being used, and you can also drill down into computer accounts where you can find your stale accounts, you can find your computer accounts that are not managed, and also your group policies as well. For instance, if I head into AD Manager Plus and head into reports, we've got a group reports right here for all group related cleanup. We've got computer reports right here for all computer related cleanup. For instance, inactive computers or active computers, right? And if I further head deeper into GPU reports right here, you can find out unused GPUs. You can find out GPUs that have user settings disabled or enabled. You can find out GPUs that have blocked inheritance enabled. Alright, and not just that, we also have something called compliance-based cleanup. So if I head into reports again and head into compliance, these are reports that you need to stay compliant, right? So you can target those particular values in Active Directory, and you can make sure that you are compliant to the policy. For instance, the GDPR policy says your shares in your servers must be secure, right? And using this report, you can drill down specific to the GDPR policy, and you can ensure that all the permissions that are required by the GDPR policy are in adherence to the policy, right? Are in accordance to the GDPR policy, and similarly for other compliance reports as well. So now we have found all our permissions in Active Directory, right? And we have also realized how to fix those permissions by using the inbuilt management actions that come within the report. What's the next step? You can go ahead and give in time-bound permissions. Because most problems that we face in Active Directory is that users, administrators or help desks generally give permissions, but they forget to revoke them, right? Which gives a lot of unnecessary and invalid permissions, which can cause problems down the road, right? For instance, a user can have administrative privilege, can have read access over a folder with confidential data, but the help desk or the admin wouldn't have a clue about it because he or she has a lot to do, has forgotten about it. So using AD Manager Plus, if I head into workflow right here, and let's go ahead and head into create request. Right, so over here, a requester, again, a requester is no one but just the standard Active Directory user can set permissions based on certain duration. For instance, if I click on add to a group, right, you can specify the subject, add to a group, you can select the group that you want, and just after the duration expires, the user is automatically chucked off from the group. It's automatically removed from the group without the admin having to remember to go in and manually remove the user. Similarly, we also have the same logic going on for files and folders as well, where you can set permissions on files and folders based on a specific duration or a specific time. Here we are. So a requester basically requests for an action. It goes through multiple people right here. This is a complete workflow. And once the permission is assigned over a group or a file or folder, the permission will be available only for that specified amount of time, after which it will automatically be revoked. So how does this actually help us in cleanup? When we time our permissions, right, there is no need to go back and manually revoke the permission. Therefore, there is no cleanup needed because the cleanup is automatically done because the permissions are time bound. What's the tip? Other tip that I would give you is to actually automate processes for efficient cleanup. Now let's face it, going in, generating a report and making cleanup activities on the report is a very cumbersome task to do. Right? If you can automate certain processes, they will keep running in the background, but at the same time on the admins or the help desk consent. So you can be free of the task, but you are informed at all times. For example, template-based hybrid user creation. Now, most mistakes that we do is during onboarding of users, right? When we onboard users, especially in hybrid environments such as Office 365 or Exchange or G Suite, we tend to give in group memberships that are wrong, right? We tend to give in wrong permissions. We tend to give in wrong attribute values. We cannot help it. We are humans. We make mistakes, right? By using template-based hybrid user creation and by automating the entire process, we do not have to do things manually anymore. Because when we set up an automation, so if I head into AD Manager Plus, we have something called automation right here. Right? And if I click on create new automation, and let's say create users, right? Users will be created from a predefined template that is defined by the admin or the help desk. The value can be taken from a CSV file or an MS SQL server or an Oracle database or any application that has been integrated with AD Manager Plus. And whenever the automation is run, users are created using the values specified within the template, thereby eliminating the human error factor, right? Because everything is now automated, but at the same time, the admin is constantly notified. There is no automation run without the admin's consent. Right? Similarly, we have the stale account cleanup as well. Instead of manually going in, generating the inactive users report and finding out inactive users, you can simply automate the entire process. The users are found, they are disabled and they have moved, and they can be deleted from Active Directory, and not just from Active Directory, but also across Office 365, Exchange, thereby giving a completely clean Active Directory. This entire process can be automated, And the best part is the admin is notified at all times. And if you wish, you could combine automation with the business workflow tab right here. I hope you remember this. This is where we actually gave in time-based permissions. But if I head deeper, we have something called business workflow, right? So before every automation is run, it can go through multiple people or multiple reviewers or approvers that you set, and only when they approve will the automation actually execute. So this is taking the load of the admin or the help desk, but at the same time, we are ensuring transparency in the process because people are informed at all times. So a quick summary of what we saw. We saw the problems that come when we don't perform efficient cleanup. And we saw how to clean up with the native solutions and the problems that come with the native solutions. And in order to overcome this, we employed a structured approach where first, we learned to gain visibility into our infrastructure using our reports with an AD Manager Plus and using the built-in actions within the report, right? We were able to perform cleanup on the visibility that we gained, on the information that we found. And also, in order to fast forward the process or to make the cleanup process more efficient, we set time-bound permissions. So this way, the admin never has to worry about unnecessary or stale permissions being left on Active Directory objects. And finally, we improve the cleanup process with automation, right? And by using automation, we improve the entire process of cleaning up. And this is just two examples that I have given, but there is more than one way automation can be leveraged in AD Manager Plus to perform cleanup activities. Are we done here? We just gained visibility. We cleaned up all of those accounts. And we also set processes in place using time-bound permissions and by using automation within AD Manager Plus. Are we done yet? We just have one more step. Complete backup and recovery. Why do we need a backup? Right? So you can always have a system restore point. I'm sure most of you relate with this term, right? You can always have a restore point of all of your Active Directory objects and their attributes, right? So just in case something goes wrong, just in case there is an irreversible damage being done, you can always roll back to a safe point. So that it can be done with the backup feature in AD Manager Plus. So if I quickly head into backup, here we are, and you can now see that you can have backups for users, computers, contacts, groups, your DNS nodes, and the backup is restart free. You do not have to restart your domain controllers to perform the backup, and are granular as well. For instance, you can restore only certain attributes for your objects within Active Directory, and that's it. Alright, so a backup can function as a safety net. Should anything go wrong, should an irreversible damage be done, so should something catastrophic happen to your Active Directory, you can always roll back to a safe point. So that concludes my today's webinar, right? So it's time to scrub your Active Directory clean. It's time to clean up your Active Directory because it's been too long. This is 2020. Let's just gain a fresh start by performing a thorough cleanup on our Active Directory environment. And how did we do that? Just to run a quick recap with you again. We gained visibility by using the reports, and we cleaned up using the built-in actions within the report. After which, we set time-bound permissions, so there is no cleanup required. And finally, we performed an automation. We automated the cleanup processes, so cleanup can run 24/7, but at the same time, the admin is informed at all times. Now, I will be closing the webinar, but before I do, I will be pushing out two polls that will come across your screen. It would be great if you could just answer the polls and help me out. And yes, so I will be pushing out the first poll right now. This will be the first poll. Here we go. It would be really great if you could just punch in the answers to the poll. Thank you so much. Now I would be pushing another poll as well. There we go, and launch. It would be really great if you could just reply back to the poll. That's great. So yes, thank you so much for being a part of today's webinar. You guys have been an amazing audience. If you have any questions, I will be here for the next 5 minutes. Or if you get any questions later, or if you missed asking me questions today, you could always drop an email to me and I would be more than happy to help you out. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day ahead.